All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ come upon you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horrorheads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And we are taking a break from the Year of the Monster and doing vampire movies to do one that has been highly sought after since everyone has seen the trailer for this, and we put it up on our Instagram and it was all over. Everybody's been asking us, when are you going to do Late Night with the Devil? Well, here we are. We are doing Late Night with the Devil tonight. And we are going to open with a section that we're calling Good Evening Night Owls. But before we get too much further, we want to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by Cavendish, creators of the magic relighting birthday candles. Try the all new, all wax, no wick, flaming horrors. Cavendish, found wherever your candles are sold. So, Dave, as we get into, we're having some fun tonight, folks. Dave, we've been talking about Late Night with the Devil since the first time we saw a trailer for this. I texted it to you immediately. We've both been so excited about this. Fortunately, it's a Shudder film. It's come to streaming already. It's still showing in theaters in some places. But if you have Shudder or AMC Plus, you can watch this now. And I'm going to let you start off. Dave, what did you think about Late Night with the Devil?
So I didn't know exactly what to expect with this. All I knew was that the trailer grabbed my attention immediately. David, that's Malchian, was like, we've been talking about this guy, I feel like, nonstop all year.
This is our third movie with him this year. Between Last Voyage of the Demeter and The Boogeyman.
And The Boogeyman, right. And I was just like, fuck. I mean, we might as well be called Shiver, a David That's Malchian podcast at this point. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm in, man, because it's a period piece. It's 70s. Late night talk shows, which I'm not really into anymore. I feel like that's maybe the kind of thing that most people are kind of there. Like, they might watch it, they might not, and it's not really a big deal anymore. But there was a long time where that was a deal, and like who your late night talk show host was a big deal too. It was like who you watched for for the 11 o'clock news. So I was always a Conan O'Brien guy. Right. And I guess he was like late night, not like the Tonight Show. Not like the Johnny Carson.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, we'd be in like the Letterman Leno.
Right. And I was definitely a Leno guy.
Me too.
I wasn't so much a Letterman guy. His sort of like dry, he came off as an asshole. I don't know. I didn't really appreciate his kind of humor at that time. But I was really into late night, and this was kind of a throwback. And so I'm here for the wardrobe, I'm here for the set pieces, and I figured as long as it keeps me engaged, I'm good. And wow, did it keep me engaged from start to finish. This was something that I think just about anyone can watch.
Yeah.
And like, even if you're not really a horror fan, I think you can still watch this and appreciate a lot of it. I don't know how you felt about that.
So, no, I'm 100% with you. Anybody who has been within earshot of me today has heard me talk about this movie and how much I loved it, because you're 100% right in the fact that this can be recommended to anyone. It's scary, but it's not overly gory. It's not overly sexual, minus a handful of F-bombs. I mean, it's just barely rated R.
Yeah.
And so I was all in on this. I didn't have any idea what to expect. I didn't know what I was in for. Like, I just knew the same things as you. This trailer looks awesome. I love this guy. It's about possession. Like, let's go. And so I actually watched this last night with friend of the show, Hunger, and because we'd been trying to go see it in theaters, and I swear to you, the theater here in Tuscaloosa is only showing it one time a day. And it's like they learned my schedule and then just made it to where I could never see it. He texted me one day. He's like, let's go see Late Night with the Devil Sunday. I'm like, cool. I'm free until 6. Like, let's grab a 1 or a 2. And he's like, it's only showing at 6:35. And I was like, 6:35. I can do that Tuesday. He goes, bad news. It's showing at 2:10 on Tuesday. And I was like, what is happening? And so I've just been like following this thing, like, and kind of the rise of it without, making sure I didn't catch any spoilers or anything. And so I could be surprised. And man, I loved it. It was super creepy. I'm hesitant to use the word slow burn because I don't think it's the right word here. I think it's an excellent build that manages to remain just unnerving and bizarre all of the time.
It's an exercise in rising tension.
There we go. Yeah, an exercise in rising tension. I like that.
Yeah, because it almost like even when there's a payoff for all this tension that is mounted within this scene, it's like it allows you to just get a breath of fresh air and then immediately starts building tension again. And it's building tension on top of what was there. There's a brilliant storytelling formula that was used here, and I'm fairly certain that we're going to start seeing copycats of this really soon.
Yeah, there are levels to the way that this works, from taking the time to give us a narration at the beginning about kind of what we're in for, and then easing into this type of found footage film without the shaky cam and just the high schooler with recording with their phone, because essentially that's what this boils down to, is a found footage film.
But to call it found footage almost feels cheap.
It feels dirty. Yeah, like the after the movie was over, as we're wont to do, Hunger and I immediately go to IMDb, start reading trivia reviews, stuff like that. And people kept being like, an entry into the found footage genre, and it's like, quit saying that. Like,
shut up, asshole. No, it's not.
Exactly.
But it is.
Right. And so, but the way that they presented all of that, and then they slowly built to it. We open with this guy doing the whole John Edwards crossing over thing, and all of that just builds to this incredible Act 3, where I think you could have read the script before the movie and not known what was going to happen next.
Yeah,
there was absolutely a moment there where it was me, my roommate, and Hunger sitting there, and just all of us locked in on the TV, but you could feel everybody's eyes darting back and forth. Like, wait, what's happening? Like, do you know?
Yeah.
Anybody know? Like, it was so good. In all of that, though, I never felt lost. I never felt like it was overdone or underdone. I feel like every single decision that was made while creating this movie was done intentionally and well. And it's been all I've thought about all day today, between doing research into Abraxas, doing research into the Bohemian Grove, which I've got a whole ass thing about when we get into the story.
Good.
There's so much. And so one other thing about this is I'm going to come out at the top here and speak for myself. Won't necessarily speak for Dave, but just anybody who's watching this and waiting for us to shit on the idea that they use some AI imagery, fuck off. Like, I don't care. I get it. I understand the outrage that comes with people using AI for things, and we're putting people out of work, and I understand all of this. But for reasons that I'll get into when we get into production, the AI makes sense in this. And it's just not something I'm going to be doing. So if you've been gung-ho against this movie because of 8.5 seconds of AI imagery, go ahead and turn it off now, because I'm not going to be shitting on that anytime soon.
I did not have time to look into the production, and so this is the first I'm hearing about it, and I don't care.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, when you're working,
you'll
when
care
you're-
even less when I explain to you how minimalistic it is.
I feel like there's certain things that trigger people, and AI is one of those things. The issue here, I think, is without knowing everything, is that we oftentimes give movies with low budgets allowances, and we're like,
Right.
okay, well, I understand because it was low budget, and so you have to use your money judiciously. If something like AI art exists, and it does, why would you not divert funds to the things that are going to matter more, significantly more? Because you can't AI this set,
Right.
and you can't AI the wardrobe, and that really is what makes this movie what it is. Because if it's 8.5 seconds, I don't care what 8.5 seconds it is.
Right.
It's not making or breaking the movie.
Exactly.
It's just not.
So yeah, like we had a discussion about that afterwards. A local guy here who works for a newspaper like was talking all about how he was, I'm boycotting this because I have principles, and it's like, man, just grow the fuck up. Like it doesn't. But like I said, when we get into production, I'll explain to you the parts that were there, and like I said, you will somehow manage to care even less.
All right. Oh, hang on one second.
There we go. You're back. Oh.
Do we have a message from our sponsor? Daniel, are you there? Did I lose you? You're back.
What's Ghost in the Machine?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
I think we're both here now.
All right. Fantastic.
There.
How about a message from our sponsor?
Sounds like a plan. Hi, I'm Daniel. You may know me from Shiver, a horror movie podcast, or if I'm doing things right, your dreams. If you're like me, you wake up every morning absolutely dreading the thought of slogging through the endless abyss of terrestrial dog shit that brings down every single day of your life. Then at night, you lie in bed screaming into the void, just wishing that something, anything, would answer back, giving you a reason to live, making sense of moving through the emptiness on this rock that's 67,000 miles an hour through space. At least that's how I was until I tried Abraxas. Abraxas is the first archetype, cause of all of things, the power above all, and the first principle. Abraxas gives you back control, an ethereal steering wheel on the vacuous blur of color we call life. Annoyances like dickhead guests will burn away with Abraxas. Pragmatic coworker making your life miserable? Turn their view around with the power of Abraxas. Abraxas cares not about the wants and needs of mortal man. All things are possible through Abraxas. Fall to your knees and worship at the feet of the great Archon, the Aeon, Abraxas. Unlike most modern medicines, Abraxas is for everyone. Talk to your local satanic cult leader today to see how you can bring the light of the Supreme God into your life today. I did, and you will too.
That was fantastic. Thank you to our sponsor, Abraxas.
Yes.
Found at a local cult near you. So thank you, Daniel, for those lovely words. And I think that this leads us into a section that we're calling Sweeps Week Grief, where we're going to talk about Abraxas. So Daniel, the story in here, unlike I think most of the movies that we've done recently, where story is more or less inconsequential, I think the story is actually really important in this one.
Yes.
And very much like Hereditary, who the deity that is at the center of all the drama here is, I think, is important also. So would you like to take us down to Daniel's Cult Corner?
So as we get into Late Night with the Devil, we're faced with this gentleman who is desperately trying to just make his ratings beat Carson. That's all he wants. He's always been number two.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, exactly. He's always been number two. All he wants is to beat Carson. That's it. He's been up. He's been down. He's recently had terrible tragedy in his life. He's been gone from TV, and now he's back, and he's had an idea. And on Halloween of 1977, he is going to host just a super spooky episode with a guy who does, like I said, the whole cold reading thing, like crossing over with John Edwards. He brings on a skeptic to shit all over it. And then he brings on a woman who wrote a book called Conversations with the Devil. And this girl that is possessed and that she's talking about and has written this book about. So Jack Delroy is this host, and this movie carries on, and essentially, like we said, when we get into the section of this that's the master tapes of this lost episode, we start to unpack these things slowly. This immediately gets really good with the cold reading thing going from being super cheesy and a sham like John Edwards to the ones that always manage to tug at your heartstrings because, oh, how could he know that? Right. All of that continues. We bring on the skeptic, and through all of this, one or two scary things happen. But the brilliance of the story here is because of the way that it's told, you're unsettled. All of this is just unnerving and it's bothering you. The jokes are only sometimes landing, just like a true 70s, late night TV show. And we're finally get our chance to meet, I've lost her name all of a sudden, Dr. June Ross Mitchell and Lily, the girl that she has rescued from this cult of Abraxas. And they start to talk about the conversation she's had. And this is where the movie takes a stark turn. And like you said, very similarly to Hereditary, we learn a little bit about whether or not it is Abraxas that's actually possessing her. So you start, let me not say you start. If you're me, you spend a lot of time digging into who Abraxas is. And it was so perfect to go with Abraxas as this deity because it gives you not a lot of name recognition. It's not anything where it's just kind of laughable or like, oh, that's been done 100 times. But it doesn't take a lot of digging to realize that historically, Abraxas is one of the most celebrated and feared gods, deities, demons, depending on which angle you're coming at this from, through history. There's arguments about the etymology of it, whether it's Egyptian, Hebrew, Greek. The Catholics then took it and were like, he's a pagan god, so he's a demon. And Abraxas doesn't go away. And so as you read all of that, and then you start to think back through the story, you start to realize that once they brought Abraxas into the studio, Abraxas never left. And he became omnipresent through everything that happened. From the moment that Lily goes to sleep, Abraxas is there. The doctor says, don't worry, he can only go through her. I just opened the door. Those are the words that you don't like to hear being used when you're talking about a demon, right? We tend to not want to open doors. Why? Doors go both ways, right? Doors let things in, doors let things out. That's how it works. So at this point, we're now faced with just literally all hell breaking loose in this studio. And then we get that genius moment of the skeptic proving that none of it's real by hypnotizing the entire audience at one time.
What an amazing moment in that movie. It
was just genius, the way that whole thing goes. The thing about the story to this movie is it tells us everything. I mean, it's textbook in its delivery. It's textbook in its format. It's surprising in its delivery. It opens with exposition. Yeah. Then we get some build. Then we get a climax. Then we get one of the most disturbing, denouements in recent cinema history. And so you look at it, and it's real easy to break it into those parts. And it makes it even more genius that it's so just flawlessly executed.
I agree with everything. I think that for a lot of the movie, I predicted exactly what was gonna happen because it was textbook. It was following a formula that it knows works until it didn't. And
Right.
and for me, that was my jaw was on the floor for approximately 20 minutes. And I'd be like, oh, I got to pick this thing up. And then bam, it would hit the floor again.
Yeah.
Because there was a moment where I didn't know what was real anymore.
Yes.
And I think that when you're watching a found footage style movie, which again, to sublimate this to found footage, I think is to do it a colossal disservice. But when you're talking about found footage, typically you use found footage to earn the trust of the audience so that they know that what they're seeing is actually happening.
Right.
There's no trick. And it's supposed to seem real. It's
Yeah.
why Blair Witch Project was so fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And Carmichael proves to us, hey, it's possible. It's possible. And then seeing that video play, like, fuck, he hypnotized me.
Yes.
I, in the audience, was hypnotized.
Yes, me on this side of my television screen was hypnotized.
And the thing is that it made that moment so much more special because I remember watching the hypnotism scene and thinking there's audience members that are laughing hysterically, and that was scary to me. Like, holy shit, he's hypnotized, or he's doing this, and there's people in the audience that are finding like all of this viscera and this gore hysterical. I'm like, that's like even more fucked up than the fact that he's doing this thing. And then when you realize, like, oh no, they just saw what was actually happening, and I didn't. I was taken into his hypnosis. That is such an amazing moment.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I can't think of another movie. It might have happened, but I can't think of another time where I thought to myself, I was so sucked into a movie that I was hypnotized by it. And obviously he didn't hypnotize me, but I had that idea in my mind when he started doing this thing, and I was watching it, and I'm like, oh, it's going to fucking hypnotize me too. Motherfucker, it hypnotized me.
Yes.
What an amazing moment that I was so sucked into the movie that when I realized I'd been hypnotized, I was, again, like hypnotized. I was like, holy fuck, this is the greatest thing that has ever happened in a movie. It's like there's Darth Vader taking his lightsaber out in Rogue One. There's Indiana Jones being dragged by a truck. And now there's this.
Yes.
Wow, man. Wow.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's I hate to say it this way because I'm definitely a proponent of seeing movies on the big screen. But I'm almost glad that I saw this at home where I could pause and rewind at will, because there's so many little things that happen where I'm like, did what I think happened just happen?
Yeah.
And I think the best example of that is the scene where Lily is being possessed and Lily goes to bite.
Oh, that hurt.
Distorts. Her mouth turns into this like weird animalistic, almost like a rictus grin. And then fangs. Like, what the fuck? What the fuck was that?
Yeah, dude, there were so many great little things like that. And to where every time there would be kind of, like that little film skip or something like that, I wanted to be like, wait, did I miss something? Even before they did the thing where they rewind it and they're on the
Mhm.
show watching the film of the show, every time I'm like, oh, I wonder what they hid in there. And all of those little things. But dude, her face, like I was I was in denial about whether or not it had actually happened until during the end of the film it showed it for like a couple extra frames as
Mhm.
his mind is just completely collapsing in on itself. You
Yeah.
see it for longer, and I immediately looked at her and I was like, I fucking knew her face did that. That's so creepy.
Yeah. Well, and I think there was a moment in me where after he had proved that he had actually hypnotized not just shit, what was his name? His sidekick. Um
Oh,
damn.
the sidekick was not Leo. Leo was the producer. Phil, right?
I think it was no.
No, Gus.
Gus, yeah. So he had there was this moment where it was like, okay, he didn't just hypnotize Gus. He didn't just hypnotize the live audience, but he hypnotized viewers at home. That's why I was hypnotized. There's a moment there where I'm like, okay, if I was hypnotized during him, was I hypnotized during the possession scene too? And is this all really just an excuse to boost his ratings?
Right.
And because I wasn't really sure what his being Jack Delroy, what his intentions were, because there was a moment where I was like, is he just trying to use this television show to reconnect with his wife?
Right.
And then I was like, or is he now more focused than ever before? He's like, I gotta beat Johnny Carson now. I wasn't sure what was going on there, because
Yeah.
there are cheap TV tricks that are going on, and he's got guys like Christou who are coming on, and it's like, okay, the guy's a fucking quack, right?
Right.
And then he's got guys like Carmichael on, who it's like, okay, this guy is good for ratings. He's playing it by the book, and I didn't know, and
Yeah.
that maybe 1 minute, minute and a half, where I was uncertain of what exactly was going on in this movie the whole fucking time, was simultaneously the most frustrating and amazing part of this movie for me. Because
Yeah.
in a movie where I had anticipated every single step, I now had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, I felt the exact same way as I was watching it. I was like, okay, so now, yep. And then this guy comes out and he's a skeptic and he's going to start to prove why things didn't work. That pivotal scene of him hypnotizing everybody set into motion everything that happened after that and how much into it you could be, which I mentioned earlier. This thing all builds to this incredible act 3 where eventually Abraxas, or as the professor says, someone who is acting on behalf of Abraxas, right? Because we are Legion, right? There's hundreds of
Mhm.
thousands of these things, and it could be any of them, and that's what they do is they lie. So so she's talking about all of this, and then once he comes in, and they start to do the thing where they're going back and they're rewatching, everything from that moment is so goddamn unhinged that
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. And so she starts to float up and her head splits and she snaps the dude's neck by whipping his head around. I fucking love that when Haig just like drops to his knees and immediately like pledges his fidelity to the Dark Lord that's now
Yes.
risen before him. Just all of this is genius. And then you get this moment where it's like, and now it's over, and that was interesting, but then it's not over. And then you get the wildest shit where he's where he's dreaming in his own head,
You
being
know what it reminded me
possessed.
of?
What's that?
Have you ever seen, and I know this is probably a dumb question because you probably have, 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Oh yeah, of course.
It reminded me a lot of David's end,
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
where he's kind of just like falling in on himself.
Yeah.
And
And
it's so vague as to what exactly it is that's happening.
right, because this is the moment where I started to wonder, like what you talked about. Did this guy set all of this up under the guise of beating Carson because he just wanted to reconnect with his wife that desperately, and he was going to search for any and all ways that it would take? But then as that final scene plays out, you start to see it's like, okay, so now they're also, I don't want to say shoehorning because that has a negative connotation, right? But they're pushing in this story about the price of fame, right? They're just, and you get this little glimpse into one of the bizarre rituals that's going on with him at the Grove, and his wife alludes to the fact that she was the sacrifice that he had to make to get this fame, because they mentioned at the beginning his wife, a non-smoker, is diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. So immediately it's sketchy that she goes from completely healthy to this cancer's awful, you ain't gonna make it. And so you get that moment where it's like, okay, all right, so even if he was just using this to reconnect with his wife, then that is the past catching up with him, and all of these pieces that you didn't necessarily realize were all forming this one picture all start to click into place. And then they cut to a scene where he's in front of another one of those hypnosis wheels that's spinning, and he's looking directly into the camera, begging you, turn off your TV. Dude, I have goosebumps right now talking about that moment. That was so creepy. And so you're going, okay, wait, so is he hypnotized again? Like, what is happening right now? And then it just cuts to him stabbing Lily, and the sirens go, fade to black, title block. It was nuts.
Yeah.
And it bizarrely made no sense. Nothing that happened in any of those moments made any sense, but at the same time,
How could it end any differently?
exactly. It was such a perfect way to tie up every fucking loose end in this movie. The movie was over and I had no questions. I wasn't going, well, what about this or what about that? Because it's over. And the final thing he does is he says what Haig says to pull the guy out of hypnosis. And he's just repeating it over and over to himself. And you're going, well, shit, he's not hypnotized. This is just his life now. And all of these people are dead. And he just killed that 13-year-old girl. And the police are on their way. And this is reality. Anything before now, I don't know if I was hypnotized or not, but I know that right now I am staring into the bleak, dim reality that is the rest of Jack Delroy's life. And it was such a perfect ending.
It really was. And I loved it, even if it's not a callback to 2001: A Space Odyssey. The fact that the ending of this movie is so vague and yet conclusive all at once, I think is a resounding success to what I think is screenwriting that is truly at odds with itself, because it's got this dichotomy of like, I know exactly where this is going, and then no, I have no fucking idea where this is going. Of like, this is exactly like all the other movies that I've seen, and then this is nothing like all the other movies that I've seen, where this is the 1970s, but then it's not the 1970s.
Right.
There's so much about this story that to me is it I don't know how to describe it. I think I've run out of words, you know, and like I know a lot of words, and I
I'm a
don't
verbose
have
individual.
them. I am, and not to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty good with words, and I don't fucking know how to describe this movie.
Yeah.
I really don't. If you were to ask me to describe this movie, I would agree that it's a horror movie. And I think anyone who says it's not a horror movie is just an idiot.
Yes.
But I think it's also a science fiction movie. And I think it's
Yes.
also a movie about religion. And I think it's a
Yes.
movie about grief. And I think it's a romance movie. And I think that there's so much in this that, like, it feels weird to say this, but no matter what you're going through in life, you'll get something out of this movie.
Oh, 100%. And there's a word that you used in there that I want to take a second to, and it's a word that we've used a lot as we've gone through this podcast, and we keep doing movies, especially modern ones. And you said it's a movie about grief.
Mhm.
When we did, now if you're still new to the podcast, you've not gone back through our library, go back and listen to our Hereditary episode, see what we rate it, right? We've seen the mountaintop on how you make a movie about grief, right? We've been there, and Hereditary sits upon its throne of severed heads, looking down on all other movies about grief. And we've seen others do it well, and we've seen others this year do it not so well. This movie manages to be about grief without making it a cornerstone of what it is doing in such a way that, like we discussed with the Boogeyman, where it's just like, you just had to hit on that because that's what's popular right now.
Mhm.
It manages for it to be one drop in the ocean of storytelling that we're given here. And I thought that because as soon as it was like his wife was diagnosed with cancer, I was like, please don't be another movie where the entire driving force is supposed to be grief. Like, I understand that grief is a real and horrific thing that is relatable. So I understand putting it into movies, but I'm not ready for another movie that attempts to make it all about that. And they managed to not do that. And I thought that was incredible.
And like you said, it's a drop in the bucket of story here. And for a movie that's 93 minutes long, it manages to say so much about so many things.
Yeah.
I think movies like this are a rarity these days. And I feel like it happens maybe more in horror than it does in other genres. Like my oldest son right now is watching the live action Transformer movies for the first time. He's really into the original animated show. He's been watching that animated movie from like 86 or whatever, like
you got basically since he was born.
You've got the power when all hell's breaking loose and you're right in the eye of the storm. So sorry, Stan Bush. He told me, he's like, how long is this movie? I'm like, dude, it's like 2.5 hours long. He was like, that's kind of long for an action movie, no? And I'm like, well, not anymore.
Yeah.
Not anymore. And that, unfortunately, I think is the truth, where like you can go to a movie theater, but 10, 15, 20 years ago would have been a tight 90-minute action, horror, sci-fi, whatever. And now it takes you twice as long to get it all. And more often than not, I find myself thinking, well, if they had trimmed this out, it probably would have been better. Or if they had trimmed this other part out, it might have been better. And I think that this movie gets that, where it's like, we're giving you none of the fat. We're giving you all just grade A awesomeness here. And I applaud everyone who's involved in this, because it gives guys like you and me hope that for significantly less than what Blumhouse is spending on their movies, you can get something that is of equal quality. Because I'm definitely not going to sit here and shit on Blumhouse, because I love Blumhouse.
Right.
But their movies are not inexpensive movies. Studios like A24, I think, are showing us that you can have a lower budget and you can make a movie that's under 2 hours and not just get like critical acclaim, because this movie is stupid fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yes.
And like, I've yet to read anything negative about this. I'm sure there's going to be people who don't like it because you can't please everyone. But I mean, wow.
Yeah. And so, you know, one of the other things about the story of this movie that was so great as we were discussing the idea of how real it feels versus then questioning what is real. When we learn about Jack Delroy, we learned that he is a member of this, you know, this society called the Grove. And it's basically, you know, it's a good old boys club, and they go to the woods and get naked and, I don't know, probably blow each other, right? And but they do these arcane rituals, and it's where all the hoity-toities go, and all the people with money, and that's how you get up in the world. And so I was looking into this today. And so when we're talking about realism in the movie, on top of the fact that you've got Abraxas, which is a very real historical figure, literary figure, you also have the Grove seems to be, and look, I'll just go ahead and say is a direct analog of something called Bohemian Grove, which is this giant campground in California that is owned by the private gentlemen's club, the Bohemian Club. And it is a place where the rich and powerful went to get together and discuss what they're going to do to make each other more rich and powerful. When you go to the Wikipedia page for Bohemian Grove, the picture that's on the left has, in one picture, standing around a table talking, you've got Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, Harvey Hancock, who was the campaign manager for Richard Nixon, Glenn T. Seaborg, who is a Nobel Prize winning chemist, and all of these people who obviously went on to do amazing things, for better or for worse. Ronald Reagan, I'm looking down at you in hell. So
don't leave Nixon out either.
Okay, fair. And so so again, you're drawing from these things that make the movie feel so real. You've got this real footage of Times Square in the 70s, you know, when it was just gross. And it was just porno theaters and hookers. And
the good old days.
I was about to say, and anybody who thinks I'm just using this as a platform to shit on New York, go look it up. That's what Times Square used to be. If you think that Times Square has always been this family-friendly thing where a cowboy in his underwear plays acoustic guitar for you, you're in for a hell of a surprise.
You're lucky he's got his underwear on these days.
And so I fell into this rabbit hole of reading about the Bohemian Grove, and it's so bizarre. It's so crazy. And what's funny is all of it is documented none of it is like primary sources. There's nobody who's just like, let me sit down and give you an interview about Bohemian Grove, right? It's
no one Leah Remini did.
Right, exactly. No one went clear on Bohemian Grove. And so you get into it and it's like, oh, okay, so this is what secret societies are. And it's this really bizarre and fascinating thing. And so what's great about this movie is, if you're a guy like me, like I said earlier, movie's over, Hunger and IMDb up. What's the trivia? Where do we know that guy from? You know, what are people saying about it? But then this is me. I then am like, okay, well, now let me pull up the Wikipedia for that movie. Let me read about this. Oh, what does that blue link take me? Ooh, where does that blue link take me? And this is how I end up losing my mind times for the show, because Bohemian Grove is this ridiculous idea of just anything. Like the fact that this exists and it's a secret society, but we know so much about it is terrifying. And so
And then,
now,
like, you have to think, we know so much about it. How much do we not know?
exactly, right? It's looking down at the puddle, and it's like, okay, well, I know that I can see a couple inches into it, but that thing could keep going forever. What do I know? Right. And so now knowing that was where they drew inspiration for the Grove in this movie, to me makes it even scarier, because that
Yeah.
just shows that the people who made this movie put the effort into making this feel like real life horrors that might come get you. And I loved that.
Absolutely.
So I mean, like you've said twice now, we're out of words. We've gushed about this story. It's incredible. And so now we're going to get into another section that, since we're talking about a TV show, we're aptly naming this section Cast and Crew. I mean, let's talk about the people in this movie, because as much as we've gushed about the story, I think there's a good amount of gushing left to be done here about the people who are in this movie. So I'll let you go first.
All right. So, I mean, it might be the low hanging fruit here, but David Dastmalchian
Do it. I did it last week.
as Jack Delroy. Holy shit, man. I don't know why now he's blowing up. I don't know why. Maybe he is part of the Grove. But I feel like he's gone from like character actor, where he did,
the goofy role in Ant-Man.
The goofy role in Ant-Man. Before that, he did the disturbed character in The Dark Knight, one of many. But
right.
We know who I'm talking about. To all of a sudden, he's carrying productions, and in something like The Boogeyman, where he's got a small but important role. I mean, it is important.
Right.
Literally the best role in the entire movie. I don't want to say single-handedly, because literally every person in this cast does a phenomenal job. But if there's one person who shoulders the burden of carrying this movie, it's him. Because he gives us tender. He gives us loving. He gives us conniving. He gives us willful. He gives us everything. Like, this is a 100% real person that I'm seeing. If you were to tell me that this was actually found footage, I'd believe it.
Yeah.
Because that, to me, was one of the most real performances I've ever seen. Fucking wow. Like, I was constantly reminding myself that I'm watching a movie, that this is an actor, that he's probably pulling from some real life experiences that he's had, but that's not actually happening there.
Yeah. What's incredible about his role. So we do this every week. I also host things in town. I host trivia and bingo and some things like that. And as someone who hosts things, you're just talking in front of people, there is a certain level of narcissism that comes with that. I tell people all the time, for all of my flaws, one of them is not, I am very self-aware, and I will admit that I am a narcissist. And I love this. I love these moments, right? And you get that from Jack Delroy, that he loves this. He loves being in front of all of these people. But you also get those moments that anybody who's ever hosted anything has, which is telling jokes that don't land, telling, like, relaying some sort of anecdote that doesn't come across the way you wanted it to. Those moments where suddenly you have to open yourself up so much more than you thought than you were ready to. And it's just, in that moment, it was the right thing to do. And to feed this thing that is happening inside of you in that moment, you have to lean into that. He does all of that so well. He makes his super corny jokes and the audience laughs and he laughs with them. He makes his bad jokes and he gets like one snicker and you can see the look of defeat in his face, but he's immediately planning the next thing that he's going to say. What's incredible about his performance here is that I never needed him to overact to sell this idea of hacky late night TV show. He so perfectly fell into it that something that is famous for people overacting, he did it with such there was so much calm in what he did, and he took everything in stride until he couldn't anymore. And then he still tried. But then once he couldn't, you start to have this moment where it seems like his level-headedness is what was the only thing that was holding all of this together. Because once he loses it, that's when it's all over. Yeah. Once he doesn't have anything left to give, then that's when the demon takes over. And how many times on this podcast, or to any of the people who listen to me rattle on about demons all the time, have I made that point? That's what they do. They work you until you've got nothing left. They drain you. So here we go. Let's tie it into Vampire Month, right? They drain you of everything you've got. And then when you're broken and defeated, that's when they take over. He so perfectly played this character of a man who had everything, but it wasn't enough. And now we're watching him lose the last bit he has when he's at the pinnacle of what he's doing. Oh, we got a 40 or 50 share. Yeah, Carson can go fuck himself. But it's over for him at that point, at that moment, when he realizes that he's peaked. Woo, it's a steep hill down. And he tells that story so perfectly with the way he delivers lines, with the way he interacts with people, the way he interacts with Lily versus the way he interacts with Haig versus the way he interacts with Christou. Everything he does is so perfect. It shows it's not quite code switching, right? But it shows what any
kind of is, though.
Yeah, but it shows what any good host needs, right? Any good host, any good coach, any good teacher. You've got to relate to everybody in a different way. And yes, he is a man reading from a script, but those are just words. The way that his tone changed, the way that his face changed, the way that he did everything when interacting with everyone individually, I was not seeing a David Dalmakian anymore. I was seeing Jack Delroy. Yeah. And I can only assume that as an actor, that's the highest praise you can get, because I am very much it's the guy from Ant-Man guy, right? And then that's just what I always see you as. Fuck, I still call Twilight, right? He got a real name too, but I don't give a shit what it is. Or as a friend of mine said one time, so when he's doing something good, he's Batman, but when he's doing something shitty, he's Twilight. Yeah, exactly.
That's how that works, man.
That's exactly how that works. But that's always who he is.
Yeah.
I didn't see that anymore. Like, Jack Delroy was alive in my television screen, and I was watching the master tapes of this episode of Night Owls from 1977, and you can't convince me otherwise now, and that's thanks to him.
Absolutely. And a friend of the show, someone who's been name dropped a couple of times here, Michael Hunger, says, I read that he was cast because the director read an article that Malkian wrote in Fangoria about regional horror show hosts, so they knew he'd be knowledgeable. And to me, that makes sense. And I've read on a couple of occasions that there's actors who have gotten roles specifically because they expressed some sort of knowledge or passion about a specific thing. And that shows here. Like, he definitely channels television show host.
Yeah. So, you were talking about how everybody in this movie is so good. And, if the phrase that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link is true, then the chain of the cast of this movie is the one that was used to chain Prometheus to the rock, because everybody in this so perfectly kills everything they sent out to do. So the next one that I want to talk about is Ingrid Torelli as Lily.
Yes, I was torn between going with Dance Malkian or her.
So I was, it's too young to have seen this. I was 12 or 13 when I saw The Exorcist, right? And so for the rest of my life, Linda Blair will be horrifying. If I ever have the chance to meet her in real life, I plan on doing it, and I plan on telling her, like, look, I'm very scared in this moment standing next to you. If Ingrid Torelli goes on to have some amazing horror movie career, or if at any point in my life I get to meet her, I plan on saying the exact same thing to her. And I'm almost 41 now. She was ridiculously scary.
Yeah.
Special effects, mindfuck things, be damned. She was the scariest part of this whole movie. And almost immediately, she comes out, she does the cute little girl thing where she kind of, like, oh, curtsy and a spin, and she goes up. But then what does she do? She stares not into the camera. No. She stared at us. She
into
stared
your
at
soul. Yes.
us watching the movie. I Hunger here chiming in, sitting right next to me. He goes, she is looking at me, is what he says. And I was like, yeah, yep. And she's staring directly at every one of us. And it was so unsettling. And she's oh, which camera do I look at now? And she's always finding the right camera to just stare straight through you. And then she's in and out of this possession by Abraxas. And yes, they're using some voice effects and some things like that. But the way that she starts contorting her body against those restraints, and the way that then when it's over, she just falls into tears. How could you do that to me? You're supposed to take care of me. And she's crying, but then she's fine. And the whole thing is so unnerving, and it's so scary. Every little thing she did was, and I don't find this blasphemous at all to say, was on par with what Linda Blair did in The Exorcist.
Absolutely.
It was a toned down version because it was telling a very different story. But every single thing that she did left me in the same state, which was this shock and awe of being terrified of a 13-year-old girl. I was blown away by her. I talk about blue links on Wikipedia. I don't know that she's done anything else, right? She doesn't have a Wikipedia page. She exists on Wikipedia on the Late Night with the Devil page. I hope this girl goes on to make 1,000 horror movies, and that at some point we get to say hey to her at a Spooky Empire, because she is scary and I loved it.
You hit the nail on the head with absolutely everything there. But one of the things that I think she also did really, really well, which is, I think, part of why her performance is so scary, is she also channeled innocence.
Yes.
And it's I don't want to say that it's easy for like a young person to channel innocence. I mean, it's definitely easier than it is for
me.
for you or me, an older person with like lots of life experience. Like, it's a different kind of performance, right? But I still don't know. Like, I've been racking my brain. I saw this movie on Saturday. Was it that I texted you?
I think so. It was, Saturday or Sunday.
And I'm so glad that I saw it that far ahead. I knew I wasn't going to have any time this week, and I had time Saturday. I'm like, fuck, let me watch it now. I still don't know when Lily was Lily and when Lily was Abraxas. And
which is, that's how it should be. Anything involving possession is exactly how it should be.
And to me, that has to do with the fact that she channeled innocence, and that Abraxas, as the bringer of all this destruction, used her innocence to open the door from the other side. And I think that that's something that Linda Blair did really, really well in The Exorcist. But the performance was totally different because very early on, that innocence in Reagan is gone, and all you have is Pazuzu. Whereas here, I'm always questioning, like, at what point is she Lily and at what point is she Abraxas? And it might be that Lily and Abraxas coexist from the beginning.
Yeah.
That from the moment they step foot onto the set, it's already Lil Braxis or a Brilly or whatever you want to call it. Because the parapsychologist, what was her name?
Dr.
June Ross Mitchell. She says right away, she's like, I don't want to do this. This is bad. It's a bad idea. And Jack Delroy is obviously, he's handsome, he's famous, he's powerful, and has some sort of
got that hair
power over her. The fucking hair.
The fucking hair, man.
Man, I mean, I still have hair. It's thinning, but it's there. And I'm looking at his hair and I'm like, you motherfucker.
You know,
what I would give.
For all the times that popular movies bring back horrible fashion trends, I'm on board if you guys want to bring back the chops, right? Just make sure you look as good as Jack Delroy with them.
I rocked mutton chops all throughout college.
I wish I could say I was surprised to learn that.
I don't know if it looked good. I don't know if it looked bad.
It didn't. I'm going to say it didn't.
Yeah. I fucking love it.
Oh, so good.
I did mutton chops and I did the handlebar mustache.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
And then I did the James Hetfield for a while where I did a full beard but without the chin. That was nice.
How very metal of you.
Yeah.
I dig it. But yeah, and the thing about the Dr. June that was so good with her was she, even though that she's a professor of parapsychology, she obviously knows what she's doing. She, the actress Laura Gordon, who played her, so perfectly had this whole weird, like, Babe in the Woods vibe.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because you're a parapsychologist who just wrote a book and now you're on live television like this. She was a fish out of water, right? She was out of her element, and she obviously has a thing for Jack Delroy, so she's trying to impress him and all of that. And she was a great foil to all of the confidence and je ne sais quoi that was Jack Delroy, right? She was me. I'm just a parapsychologist trying to take care of a kid, and that was what she had. And so she so perfectly played that idea of, I mean, she got railroaded, just 100% got railroaded, and every time you see her, you could see in her face, it's like, what the hell is happening? Like, why are we going through with this? Why am I doing this? And then cut over to Jack Delroy, and he's got the hair and he's got the face and just the little, the little smile, and he's so ready. It was, she did a great job as well.
She did. I'll talk about one more person. Ian Bliss as Carmichael Hunt, I think was so perfect as that recurring guest, because obviously he'd been on the show before. And if you saw late night talk shows at any point in time in the past, you knew that there were always guests that it was like, this is going to be a good episode. This guy's on. It was, for me, it was always like I mentioned, I was a Conan O'Brien guy. If Paul Rudd was on the show, I knew it was going to be spectacular. And I expected certain things. So like if you've seen Late Night, you've seen it before. People bring clips of the movies that they're on, and he always brought the same exact clip, which was not a clip of his movie, but a clip of the movie Mac and Me, which is an awful movie.
It's so bad.
Little kid in a wheelchair going down an incline, smashing into a quarry somewhere, and then there's fucking Mac. He comes out with a stupid little face, and whoop. I expected it, and if I don't remember a time it didn't happen, but I remember thinking like it better fucking happen,
and it was still can't miss.
No,
yeah,
no. So and that's one of those things, and I think Saturday Night Live is another one of those too, where if you see a specific host, it's like Christopher Walken's hosting, I'm fucking there. I haven't seen a single episode this season, but if that guy's fucking on, yes, you bet your ass I'm gonna be.
Yeah, watching. Exactly. John Goodman. John Goodman. TV's on.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like he channeled that, and not just that, but he was so sure of himself. He played that role, and I don't think I've ever seen him in anything else. But man, he played that so masterfully.
Yeah, he was incredible. Played by Ian Bliss. We had a lot of fun last night, kind of going through and looking up what other stuff these people have been in. Apparently this movie was made in like Australia. Ian Bliss was actually in the Matrix sequels. If you looked at All Familiar to You, that was the only thing that we could find. But I will say one of the funniest ones, and I'm not going to talk too long about the character of Chris Dow. He did what he had to do. He played his role, but there is when he was played by an actor named Faisal Bazi, and he was in an Australia movie called We're Not Here to Fuck Spiders.
What a great title.
And so, which
I agree. We're not here to fuck spiders either.
Which then led to an entire conversation about whether or not that was an actual Australian turn of phrase. Apparently it is. Margot Robbie has said it before. So there we go. But, so they definitely put together something amazing here. And when we come back after these messages, we're going to talk about the final piece of what made this all so amazing as we get into the production. But we're going to break for a commercial first.
Have you got a cold? Try new prescription grade Abraxol. Abraxol channels the power and glory of Abraxas into an easy to swallow pill. Now you can burn with the fire of eternity with the Archon Supreme. Shiver no more as your temperature climbs to supernatural heights. Side effects may vary, but often include dry, cracked skin, black, vomitous spouting, and fang-like dental transformations. Abraxol. Ask your friendly neighborhood priest of Abraxas for a prescription today. Refillable at any Woolworths near you.
See, got to make that money somehow, right? And if it's coming from Abraxas and Abraxol, then that's how we're going to do it.
So be it.
Right? The plan's always been to monetize this thing. Hope that you listeners are still along for the ride. So you mentioned it at the top here that one of the things about this movie that's so amazing is the overall aesthetic of how everything goes, but it goes a lot deeper than the aesthetic. So we're just going to call it production, right? Because we don't need anything special. We don't need a pun here to describe how amazing the production of this film is. So Dave, you mentioned it first at the top. Talk about the production first for us.
Okay. So I think that from a production point of view, the rhetorical choice to have parts of this movie in black and white was brilliant. And the points in the movie that are monochromatic make sense. And I think that this is part of the reason why the movie transcends found footage and turns into something more. and it moves beyond that sort of voyeuristic view that we often have with found footage movies, because it gives us greater insight into what's going on. And it's because it combines different kinds of found footage to give us a complete story. Oftentimes I find that the one issue I have with found footage is that everything is told from that one point of view, and therefore feels incomplete.
Right. You end up with unreliable narrator.
Exactly. But what this does is it puts us in the seat of a viewer at home watching the broadcast, a viewer in the studio audience, and a viewer of this behind the scenes footage, so that what we get is continuous footage of that, hour and a half long show. That's really what it is. The movie takes place in almost real time, and just about real time, because from the moment that the curtain opens and here comes Jack Delroy, there's never a break. And there's very, very few movies where I think the story is told in 100% real time like this, and it always sucks you in. It sucks you in, and I think that you feel much more intimately involved in the action that's going on. For me, I think my favorite real time movie might be High Noon. I know it's an old Western, but fuck, it puts me in the shoes, and I feel like, well, fuck. I mean, that train's going to be here in like 10 minutes. He's got no one here to help him out with these fucking cowboys. What the fuck is going to happen? And that's exactly what I felt here, where it's like, okay, they're going to bump that final guest, which again is another fantastic, like from a writing perspective, there's always those guests that never get on. Saturday Night Live used to make fun of this all the time on What's Up With That? They would never get to Lindsey Buckingham.
Yes.
So funny. I love that. For me, that was one of those things where I was like, fuck, from a production point of view, the fact that we get to see all the different angles that are going on here. So really what we get is that third person perspective, that omnipotent observer really is what we end up getting. So it goes beyond found footage. Is it found footage? Yeah, you can say that it is found footage, but it's so much more than that. And because it uses all these different mediums, from the handheld camera to the video camera, it really is mixing these different mediums of horror together to give us something that I think transcends found footage.
Yeah. For me, like and so if we're going back to things we talked about at the top, right? I do want to take a second to discuss the AI art used in this. So the AI art in this was those title blocks that would appear that was like, we'll be back after these commercials, or like the title that was all created with AI. So first and foremost, this movie was filmed and completed well before the writer's strike and all of these new things about you can't use AI to do anything were implemented. It was already done. It was finalized before all of that. So you can't, shit on them for doing something that was against the strike. But Hunger and I were talking about this today and started discussing the idea that in this movie, whether consciously or not, the use of AI ends up fitting the concept perfectly, because I talked about how for beginning of this movie, very little that's scary happens, but it's constantly unnerving. And so through the use of these AI title blocks and these things that are, that are just hack, it lends to that because it's so soulless. It's so empty that when these things are happening, that it adds to the creepiness of what you're watching. It it doesn't take away from it. And there were people who were attached to this movie who were doing other things that then worked on these, so they weren't taking work out of the hands of people. It wasn't just somebody who wasn't getting paid for it creating these real fast so they wouldn't have to pay somebody to do this. But it added to that, and it can really be summed up and noticed the best in what was one thing that drove me insane, but in a way that made me like the movie more. And that was that fucking commercial block that was like, we'll be right back with our Halloween special.
Yeah.
That is the worst goddamn pun in the history of bad pun. That is fucking terrible. You skipped it. You could have done Halloween, or you could have done or you could
literally anything else.
Yeah, you could have done. Yeah, there was just so many other ways to do it. But Halloween, like, you double up on the W's, it doesn't make any sense, and so it annoys you, and it puts you on edge. And so, yeah, okay, did a computer create it? Sure, but did creating it with an empty hollowness, with no soul, no spirit behind it, make what everything else and that the people did in the movie pop more? I think so. By using these AI billing blocks that just filled space between these amazing performances, the effort and soul that these people poured into their roles in this movie came through even more. So even if that was not the conscious decision that they made when they decided to do this, when they were making it, they're just like, oh, this is a cool technology, let's see what we can make it do. But when you come at it from that angle, they actually add to all of those great performances, all of the drama that's in this movie, by occasionally taking a moment to be like, this is how shitty things can be. And so like I said, I don't care. If it was something that they had just, like I said, that just the producer had done on his own because he didn't want to pay somebody to do it, then yeah, that's shitty. And now there are rules against it, and I get it. But this movie has been made for quite a while to just get released now. And so when something's shiny and new, you check it out. When CGI was first around, there were plenty of people up in arms about all the VFX artists that this was taking work from. And now you're giving it to the nerds, the computer nerds, not the latex nerds, right? Oh, those are the wrong nerds. But now we found that you can blend these things and you can use it, and you can just pay people to do these things. So, like I said, if you're listening to this because you're like, oh, I'll never watch that movie, let's just see what they've got to say about it, and that's your reason, then just get fucking over it and maybe just enjoy the movie. So that one thing, because that was literally the only thing I knew about this movie outside the trailer, was that people were up in arms about this AI, and then it finally happened, and I was like, what? I mean, it's not like
that's
we
what all the hubbub was about.
Yeah, it's like, it's not like we didn't pay an actor to do this one role and there's a fucking hologram there. Like, it's just a still frame. It's literally a still image that fills some space. And so, but when the more and more we talked about it and thought about it, the more it can make sense in the context of what's happening here, and just adds to the production value of this movie.
It absolutely adds to the production value. And listen, I don't know if you've used AI for generating art.
I have not.
I have a little bit between programs like Canva and Midjourney and Discord. I've used it, and AI is, I mean, it's a fact of life, right?
Right.
And all they used AI for in this, in my opinion, is to speed up production for something that would have taken someone way too much time and effort to do anyway.
Yeah, this movie had a budget of $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it, $1 million. Which, yes, I say that's it, $1 million, but all things relative, right? We're looking at a movie that
Right.
got major release and is amazing, and they did it with $1 million. So,
and you look at where the money was spent, and it was spent where it mattered, because the effects that are present at the end of this movie, with Lily's head splitting open, with the beam of light, with a a melting effect that I don't think has been as effective as that since like Raiders of the Lost Ark.
right.
Wow, man. Like I can't believe that it was only $1 million
Yeah.
that was spent on this.
And what's another incredible thing about the special effects and just the visuals of this movie, I think we found out afterwards that over the course of this movie, they went through 6 different aspect ratios while creating this
Yes.
movie. And it was constantly putting you in a different place, right? You've got your 4:3 because it's supposed to be a TV show from the 70s. The very first thing I noticed when the final act started was the fact that now we were in full 16:9.
It went
And
anamorphic, yeah.
And the cameras were 4K, right? We're in full high def now. And
Yeah.
it was this stark thing that, again, you're wondering, shit, is this happening? Because why would it suddenly look like this if we're just watching the same tape? So you've got all of that, which was a genius move. But one thing that I think both added to the movie and saved them money on the budget was the fact that when we were watching something that was supposed to be from the 70s, for the most part, the effects looked like something that would have been created in the 70s. And I was so digging that. The little like blue electricity that was like running through wires and stuff at a certain point looked straight out of late 70s, early 80s. Like that blue electricity running through a wire like that, plug it into Ghostbusters. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Right. So many of those special effects that you go, but this was made in 2023. Special effects are better. Yeah, but it's supposed to look like it was made in the 70s. Right. So it added to that. So on top of the wardrobe that seemed perfect, everything looked like it was polyester and velour, right? Win. The set that looks exactly like the Merv Griffith show or anything else that would have been on that time, win. Special effects that look like they came out of 1977, it's a win. I loved it. There was, and we don't always have a chance to talk about what the outline's going to be. As soon as I pulled it up and saw you had production, I was like, this is so great, because we need to sing the praises of what they did creating this movie, and how they created not just an amazing film, told an amazing story, had amazing actors, but the atmosphere that surrounded this thing and changed constantly and jarringly enough that you were never comfortable was incredible.
The movie is a triumph. It's a triumph of filmmaking. It's a triumph of set design. It's a triumph of screenwriting. This movie, I think, is the kind of movie that will give independent filmmakers, student filmmakers, the drive and the desire to dream bigger, because this is in no way a small budget movie, except for its budget.
Right, exactly.
It's like it has the scope of something like The Exorcist, which at the time that it was made was a low budget movie, but because people dare to dream bigger, they end up making movies that become the movies that others dream to make. And this is that kind of movie. This is the kind of movie where like I, as the moderator of a high school film club, hope my students make.
Right.
This is the kind of movie that I love seeing. And even if it didn't land with me, is the kind of movie that I love to see get made.
Yeah, no, 100%. It was, You know, and one other thing that goes a little bit beyond production, but into marketing that was incredible was this movie was released on March 22nd, right, a Friday, obviously.
Mhm.
And it rolled through its first weekend, making a 200% of its budget, right? This thing's already doubled up in 3 days. But in what was a genius marketing / production move, the numbers for how much money this movie made on the Sunday after it came out were close enough. I can assume that they could legally manipulate them because, you know, box office numbers are allowed to be played with within a certain percentile. They start releasing articles all over. Variety, The Times, Rolling Stone are all releasing this blurb. Late Night with the Devil makes $666,000 on the Sunday of its release.
It's perfect.
Chef's kiss.
Marketing you can't make up.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't buy.
Yeah, no, you can't. Like and it was just like, and that blew up everywhere. And I was like, oh, this is so incredibly perfect. Do I care if that number is fabricated to an extent? Hell no. No, not for a fucking bit do I care. Like, because like I said, you're only legally allowed to manipulate these numbers so much. Right. So, yeah, if you're within like the 5%, you're allowed to play with those numbers. Go out there and make a fucking splash. Turn heads. Make people want to see this movie because people should see this movie. It's made $11 million, which, grand scheme of things, overall, not that much. Movie that cost $1 million to make. That's fucking huge.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Right. So, you know, that's the equivalent of that would be like, oh, well, it turns out the Avengers made $11 billion. Right. because and you start to go, oh, that's a lot of money. Yeah. Well, when you only spent $1 million, making 11 million is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I'm just overwhelmed at how many amazingly positive things there have been to say and talk about this movie from beginning to end. It's wonderful. Everybody did a great job. Man.
Yeah. And with that, the final man, we are going to go into our Nielsen ratings. So Danny and I discussed this, and there were many options for the metric that we're going to use to rate this. And if this is the first time you're watching the show, you might be confused because it's like, well, don't you rate movies with stars or with Nielsen's? I guess that's how Nielsen ratings work. I don't know. But no, we use neither stars nor dudes named Nielsen. Every movie has its own unique rating system because we feel like every movie should be rated only against itself and judged only against itself, not against anything else. So Daniel, out of a possible 5 tall trees, how many tall trees do you give?
I'm less than 24 hours out of watching this movie. And I usually say, well, yeah, you know, it's great, this, that, but I've only seen it the once. I don't care that I've only seen Late Night with the Devil once. I know that in my future, I am going to watch this many times. This is a movie that I will constantly revisit, that I plan on always finding new things. There are so many stills from this movie that are just etched on the back of my fucking eyeballs to where I was dreaming of this movie last night. It's been the only thing I've thought of. It did everything that it did so perfectly. There is not a frame of this movie that I don't think was executed flawlessly. This movie is a 6 out of 5. Tall trees. There's absolutely not a single negative thing to say about this movie. It was excellent in its execution. It was everything that a movie should be. It was fresh, but it felt familiar. It was scary. It was funny. It did it all. It did it all. There's not a single thing about this movie that misses. And I have to give it 6 out of 5 tall trees because nothing about this movie missed.
I am also going 6 out of 5 tall trees. And if you are one of the few that are to watch the movie for whichever of the reasons that that we addressed here, stop being such a fucking nerd.
Right.
Watch the movie and thank us later.
Yes.
It's perfect. And if you don't want to watch it, that is, I mean, it's your right as a human being to do something wrong. But just understand, I think you're a fucking nerd. And you should watch the movie.
Yeah, this is the type of movie that right now plenty of people are talking about. A couple years from now, more people will be talking about. And 10 years from now, you know, AFC is going to be listing this thing really high on lists of horror movies released in the 2000s, the 2020s, whatever you want to say. It's going to be one that people are going to reference. Indie filmmakers are going to reference, look at what they did with $1 million. Major motion picture studios are going to look what they did with $1 million. You know, like from both sides of it. It's like, oh man, they did that with just $1 million, or it's like what you gave me was trash. They did this with $1 million, right? And so this is going to be a movie that I hope the creators and the people who are in this will forever receive the credit that they deserve for this. And I hope that it continues to do nothing but receive praise for everything.
And I think that within a couple of years, the little quibbles that people have about AI or whatever are not even going to be mentioned anymore.
Exactly.
It's a hot button issue right now, and so you know the fucking neckbeard's got to talk about something.
Yeah, it's virtue signaling to say that that's the reason you're not going to watch this movie. Look at how cool I am. Look at how much I support XYZ. Well, you know what? Go fucking support the people who made this movie and watch it. Put your eyeballs on it. How about you support them instead of supporting people who had nothing to do with it that are just out here bitching about shit?
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you guys for joining us so much today. We hope that you enjoyed this movie as much as we did. We will be getting back to vampires next month, next week. Technically, next week is May 1st, but we are going to carry over vampires for one, because then we still do have 4 Wednesdays in May to get on to our next topic. And we've hit some very different vampires so far. And you know, one thing that people kept saying to us when we were doing zombies is, how can you do a month of zombies without doing George Romero? Well, do we have a surprise for you? We're going to do a George Romero vampire film. That's right. Released in 1977, the movie Martin, which you can watch on fucking YouTube, because apparently George A. Romero had no idea how to secure the rights to any of his shit. Full movie on YouTube. Go watch it by next week. It is in all of its 1977 grindhouse driving glory, because this is a movie that no one has deemed worthy of remastering. We talked about it. We don't even think it's ever been released on DVD.
No, I don't think
so. So you wanted Romero. We're going to hit you with the Romero curveball. We're doing Martin next week to finish up vampires. Head to shiverpod.com, where you can find links to all of our social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. All of those places, you can watch us live every Wednesday at 9/8 Central. Follow us for fun memes, some different things. That's we always announce, remind you of what's coming out. Hopefully our sponsors will find their way to our Instagram channel. Try to drive that money over there, right? We'll see what we can do with them. We want to say thank you to Cavendish, to Braxel, and of course to the first principal, the original archetype of Braxis himself, for making this episode happen. This movie's amazing. If you're just finishing up, if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it.
Please. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.